Thank you. To start, I'd like all of you to sort of picture your world of friends and family and people you've met that bring a smile to your face, sizes, shapes, cultures, elderly, teens, tiny little babies, and most you get along really well with. And now I'd like you to kind of picture maybe family members who are great in their own right, but sometimes it's better to have a little bit of space. Yeah. And plants are the same. Many plants love being with each other, but there are going to be some plants that prefer to be apart, but maybe they come together really well in a stew. So I'm going to be talking about companion planting today, and it's generally plants that grow closely together that benefit each other in some way. So it's an ancient organic practice, and it is making a comeback. And you've probably heard of the Three Sister Gardens. This is a Native American companion planting that is hundreds, thousands of years old, used with many, many tribes across the US and around the world. And they have rich legends and stories, but in summary, you have three sisters. Sister corn grows tall, but sister corn needs a lot of food. So sister bean gets the nitrogen from the air and feeds her sister corn and her sister squash, and in return, sister corn supports her. Now, sister squash grows along the ground, suppresses the weeds, keeps the water and the moisture in the ground, so they live really, really well together. They live in harmony and balance in a small amount of space, and just like we want to live in harmony and balance with those around us, so do plants. We all need those that will help us grow and thrive. So in today's session, I'm going to touch on some basics about companion planting, some history, and then some easy ways to get started. So today, gardeners and farmers are just buzzing about companion planting. But if companion planting is so important, why are so many of today's farms acres and acres of single crops? Well, as the world's population grew, there was a real increased need to feed more and more people, and one plant growing was much easier to grow than a lot in a space. Monocrops. So here we have lots and lots of cabbage. As far as you can see, it's easy to plant one crop, it's easy to harvest, and time is money. So what's the problem? Here is the white cabbage moth or butterfly. So imagine you're this moth. You've hit the jackpot, a sea of cabbages. So you start laying your eggs. Not that bad, but then you call all your other moth friends, and they call their moth friends to lay their eggs. And you've got a ton of egg laying going on. And then all those eggs start hatching, and the larvae and caterpillars have a feast. They've got this all-you-can-eat buffet, and they just go up and down the rows, and the farmers, they can't go around and pick them off by hand in enough time, so they start resorting to pesticides to kill the offspring, but that also can start killing the good bugs as well. And then the weeds start growing, so herbicides can start being sprayed and fungicides. And in many farms, the herbicides and pesticides start becoming the first line of prevention for these pests. But soil is a living ecosystem. It's alive. So much is growing under the ground. And when it gets drenched with a lot of chemicals, it can become damaged and out of balance and even dead. Soil is dying at 10 to 100 times the rate that new rich soil is being formed. And then trying to grow in dead soil is really, really difficult or impossible. So what do? We tend to put on synthetic fertilizers. And so we can grow some things, but the problem is the soil can't absorb all of it. There's a lot of runoff into lakes and streams. And then we can get the harmful algae blooms. Sea life can start to die. It can start killing the pollinators, harming that biodiversity. And it can also start penetrating the foods we eat. Not only do farms do this, but we see that's a way the farmers are doing this. So in our homes, we start mimicking the same garden practices. But in nature, we don't see row after row of single crops growing. In the 70s, there was a big movement started, go organic, intercrop, lots of biodiversity. And we've been embracing more and more companion planting. But is it new? And what we're finding, it's not new. It's hundreds and thousands and 10,000s and more years old. So the indigenous cultures around the world, not just in the Americas, have been practicing companion planting for thousands of years, some by design, others it's Mother Nature's way of finding her own balance. And the best known are the Three Sisters gardening, companion planting. But here's some other examples. So in ancient China and then today, growing rice, companion mosquito fern, which is invasive in the US, but the mosquito fern pulls the nitrogen from the air, feeds the rice plant, prevents the weeds. They make a great companion. Ancient Rome, the olive trees. They've learned through the thousands of the years, what are the great companion other trees to grow? And what are the plants to grow around it so that the trees can thrive? In Europe, you had your 14th century cottage gardening. Small plots, so they put all sorts of vegetables, fruits, herbs, flowers, anything that could be fit in a small little area. So these cottage gardens were beautiful and bountiful. In 2011, a Cornell researcher, Morgan Rule, he was researching food diversity and he was living in Ethiopia. And he kept hearing the farmers talk about Duragna. And it wasn't really a wheat, it wasn't really barley, but it was actually a mix of both wheat and barley growing and planted and growing together for thousands of years. And this has been done throughout the world. And he found that planting maslins means mix. So you've got combinations of rice or millet or wheat or barley or ancient grains. It's been practiced throughout the world. It can still be found today. And they're not only planted together, they're harvested together. They're prepared together, consumed together in pancakes, in beer, in bread, cereals, oils. So why do they do this? And what is the advantage of mixed crops? In single crops, such as wheat, what's been found is that if there's a drought, farmers can lose the whole crop in one sweep. But with mixed crops, if there's a drought, maybe the wheat that's not as drought tolerant might not thrive, but your barley that is more drought tolerant, that will do well. Or let's say there's a huge rainfall and half of the plants that don't do well with a lot of moisture, they may not thrive, but the other half will. So the crops adapt in real time to unpredictable weather changes. And so if it's worked well for thousands and thousands of years, why did it fall out of favor? And mostly it's because it's difficult for machines to harvest. Because of machines and because of the planting time, It's easier to plant one crop like wheat and use one machine to harvest that, or corn or cabbage, and monocropping became huge. But now we're starting to return to our ancient roots with companion planting. Now, what I'm going to be going over today, some of it has been legends and folklore and myths that really weren't scientifically proved, but people had some good ideas that this helps the taste of this other crop. And now science is starting to catch up. So I'm going to try to stay scientific, but I know a lot of different companions that are folklore might crop in. So please do your research and you can fact check me as well. And today, as I go through some companion planting, there are a lot of terms that you hear out there. And I'm not going to take the time to go over the nuances, but in general, the goal is to emulate nature's natural design and rhythm and balance and get lots of biodiversity in the soil, among the plants, among the insects, among the birds, among the wildlife. So let's get into the principles and benefits of companion planting. And for each of these principles, I will present some of the good companions. But don't worry about memorizing combinations. There'll be a handout that's on the website, and you'll have a handout with some of the combinations. And I just find I can't memorize all of them. So there'll be links to the handouts, but also there's so many resources on the internet. So the first benefit for companion planting is for shade. So tall plants like corn or sunflowers, they can protect the plants that can't stand so much sun. So underneath these, tuck in your shade-loving, more shade-loving plants like your lettuce, your kale, your crimson clover, spinach, Swiss chard, and more. They make great companions. Companion planting can also provide natural trellising. So corn is a great trellis for your pole beans. Sunflowers are great companions for your cucumbers. They will grow right up the sunflower. Another reason why companion planting is great is using space wisely means that less soil is going to be exposed. And that slows down your evaporation from the soil of the water, and it saves precious water. So if you think about the row cropping and all the exposed soil, now you've got the moisture just leaving. And planting closely also keeps the soil covered, which means if soil is covered, a weed will have a hard time growing there. So for example, strawberries planted under blueberries will tend to cover the soil. Another reason why companion planting is great, it helps to improve the garden soil. Planting legumes like beans and peas naturally improves the garden soil by nitrogen fixing. And nitrogen is the key to building the proteins that the plants need to grow, their cells to grow. And it's also the main component of the chlorophyll for photosynthesis. So look, think about all the protein now in the plants. Animals eat the plants, we eat the plants. I never thought about it all these years when everyone tells me we need protein for our body. Proteins are made by the nitrogens that the plants are getting from the soil. And we need it to repair our cells. We need it to make new cells. We need it for our growth and development. And so taking care of our plants is so important. And the legume family are great nitrogen fixers. And here's a list of some of them. So there's a symbiotic relationship between bacteria in the soil and these nitrogen fixing plants. So the bacteria enters the roots, and the plant then is triggered to make those nodules, those round things. Can you see them all in the picture? And these are on your legumes. So the bacteria then, they thrive in these nodules. And they're able to take the nitrogen from the air and bring it and fix it, meaning it's now in a form that the plant can use, because the plants can't naturally use the nitrogen in the air. So it's the bacteria in these nodules that help to change it from nitrogen in the air to that which the plant can use. So when the plant then, your bean plant has died, there's still some good nitrogen in the plant. So when you cut it down, that can go back into the ground. When the plant is ready at the end of the year, cut it off at the soil surface, because all those nodules on the plant, it may not have as much nitrogen because the nitrogen has now been used. A lot of it's been used in the plant, but you'll have all that bacteria in those nodules that'll go back into the soil. So interplanting legumes with other vegetables can help your plants grow healthier and faster. And it's really helpful for your leafy greens, because nitrogen is great for that initial plant development. And I learned this lesson in my first year. I'm a new gardener. So in the first year, my husband and I built these raised beds. We brought in a lot of rich soil. I put in broccoli, and I grew fantastic broccoli leaves. No heads, but beautiful leaves. So I learned what nitrogen does in producing the beautiful greens. So there are a lot of plants that are going to benefit from and make good companions with these nitrogen feeding legumes. So these are some of your heavy feeding plants. And it's good to plant heavy feeding plants or light feeding plants with your legumes as well, or crops that fit nitrogen in the soil with plants that need to feed with them. And here's a small list of good companion plants for your legume family. So other ways of improving the soil, plants with tap roots like carrots, radishes, buckwheat, turnips, they can help to loosen up compacted soil. And if you think about some blacktop and concrete, plants make their way through that. Plants are very strong. Oh, is that still up there? So deep-rooted crops pull the nutrients up from the soil and the water from deeper in the soil, and those are good to plant with plants with really shallow roots. And let's bring on the bugs. So there are 4 ways basically why we need plants for the bugs. The first is to attract pollinators. My first year of gardening, threw out zucchini seeds, and a lot of them looked kind of like this, because I didn't realize that the bees can't find my little lone zucchini plants. I need to have a garden full of pollinators to pollinate my zucchini so that they will grow larger. So you need plants and flowers that will bring in the pollinators. So Pieris japonica, borage, marigold, these will bring in pollinators for your garden. Herbs like basil, dill, thyme, oregano, they also attract your pollinators. Lavender, cosmos, zinnias. And the more flowers, the more pollinators. They're not just pretty little things in your garden. They are doing very important work. And the more pollinators you have, the more chances that your fruit trees, your vegetables, they'll be pollinated and you'll get the fruit. And you want flowers throughout the seasons as well, not just one season. A second reason why you use companion planting is to deter pests. And pests are the ones that are going to feed on your prized lettuce and kale and your crops. That's what I'm referring to as the bad pests, and we're not going to eliminate them, but we want to keep them in check. So we can help by finding, by intercropping really strong scented herbs among your plants and strong scented flowers, because many pests come to a strong scented herb. They don't want that. They're not going to find that cabbage. So take a look at this cabbage and see how it's different from the row after row of cabbage from before. Tons of garlic interplanted with it. So the pests come and they're confused. They don't like that smell. They might leave the cabbage alone. So garlic is great, not only with deers and slugs, but for beetles, aphids. You have your mint, sage, rosemary. Your basil can repel the hornworms that love to attack tomatoes. And look how closely they're intercropped. Strong smelling flowers. Those are also fantastic to intercrop because again, they'll confuse the plants. Marigold discourages not only your four-legged creatures, but cabbage moths and bean beetles as well. And the roots of the marigold, they'll help to repel nematodes, which are tiny parasites which love to nibble at other veggies. And the nasturtiums, they'll deter a lot of things. So they're great around your brassicas, cucumbers. So plant lots of fragrant things to deter the pests. Now, you don't want your aphids all over your lettuce. So we plant trap crops. So the trap crops are ones that will attract these pests away from your prized vegetables. So it's like saying, get away from that lettuce, come over here. And they'll leave the lettuce, maybe leave the lettuce alone. And nasturtium is a fabulous crab trop. And the first year I had a garden, I planted lots of nasturtium because they're so pretty. And then I went to look and they were covered with aphids. I just got the goosebumps. And so I quickly took all of them out. And the next year I didn't plant any nasturtium because I just saw all the aphids. And now I realize they're a great trap crop. They're pulling the aphids away from my other prized crop. And then the great thing to do now when they're on the nasturtium, which I haven't been good at, when I see the aphids, just take a bucket, cut them off, let the leaf fall into a bucket, feed it to the chickens, burn it, drown it, put it in the garbage. But it's a great way luring it away and then cut and remove. So here's a trap crop nasturtium, and it's attracted a lot of the bugs away. Here's calendula. So if you see that stem, it's kind of sticky, and the undersides of the flower kind of sticky, and they're wonderful traps. So the aphids or mites will come and find it, and hopefully they'll stay away from your other crops. And these are wonderful around your kale and broccoli and collards and cabbage. And when you see it infested like this, cut it off. Feed it to your chickens, get rid of it. So with trap crops, you also might want to sacrifice other plants like collard greens, protect your cabbage. So if you don't eat as much collard greens, but you want to lure some of the aphids, you can plant those next to your cabbage and sacrifice those. Mustard plants, they protect your strawberries. It's important, though, to do your due diligence because there are a lot of myths out there. So, for example, I found articles that was talking about these 4 o'clocks that has leaves that are supposedly poisonous to Japanese beetles. And it said plant lots of them, but other experiments say, no, they don't kill the Japanese beetle. But it didn't go as far as to say, but they still make good trap crops. If you're taking a look at your moonflowers and you see these, you're cutting it off and getting rid of the beetles. Geraniums make great trap crops. But then others say they're going to attract so many of these pests. You don't want a lot of geraniums. But if they're truly trap crops, then just go and observe them. And if they are being attacked, fantastic. They're doing their work, then cut off the infected parts. They're keeping them from your other plants. And then another way that you want companion plants to attract the beneficial bugs. So interplant your flowers, creeping thyme, your herbs, your perennials, and these are like colorful beacons that attract beneficial insects. And these will help to keep the bad pests in check. So for example, dill is one of the plants that attract the beneficial ladybug. Ladybugs eat aphids. So if you're struggling with aphids, these are some flowers and herbs that can attract the ladybugs. My first year, all I had were nasturtium covered with aphids, so I ordered ladybugs online. Fly away, and they flew away and they didn't eat the aphids on my nasturtium. So there are more natural ways to get the ladybugs. So here's ladybugs and their larvae, and they can eat 40 to 50 aphids an hour. So when we attract them to our garden, they start to do their work. And the lacewings, the adult lacewings, and here are some plants that attract them. They feed on the nectar and pollen of wonderful plants, but they are really effective natural enemy of aphids, mites, whiteflies, mealybugs, leafhoppers. They eat the soft-bodied pests 20 times faster than ladybugs. And they lay their eggs on the underside of the leaves where you tend to get a lot of the pests thriving. So as soon as those pests are there and the eggs are hatching, they're going right after those pests. And parasitic wasps plant the flowers and the herbs that will attract them. Now they're so tiny you won't see them. However, they're really effective for pest control. Some will lay their eggs on the backs of different worms, hornworms, and as soon as they hatch, they just feed on these caterpillars. And some parasitic wasps lay their eggs inside the eggs of pests so that they won't even hatch. So there are some other beneficial plants, great companion plants to attract beneficial bugs. So interplant lots of flowers. They're doing several jobs. There's not just one flower to attract parasitic wasps or one to be able to be a trap crop. They're often doing lots and lots of work, so they do many jobs besides look pretty. And plant flowers that bloom throughout the seasons. Make them work for you. So for a bug review, we want to have a lot of plants to attract pollinators, like this Ceanothus, the California lilac. We want to put in plants with strong smells like garlic, onion, herbs, so the pests get confused and they move away. They don't like the smell. We want to plant crops that are trap crops so that they get attracted away from your treasured vegetables. And we want to add plants that will attract the beneficial bugs, your ladybug, your laceworms, that will feed on the pests. And we want to find a balance. We don't just want only the herbs. We want to find a balance to do all of these things. Now, in gardening, there is not a real either or. Either you use chemicals or you use organic. There's a whole continuum. And so if you're thinking about using chemicals or want some good resources, go to the WSU Extension site because there's so much information on integrated pest management. So down here, companion planting, that's your prevention. You're going to try to do that, but it might take years to get a balance. And in that time, you don't want some invasive, non-native insect taking over your garden and then flying to all of your neighbors. And that's why you use the extension site. They have horticulture sense, hort sense, pest sense, integrated pest management. They have a database of pesticides because you want some prevention like your companion planting. But if something's getting out of control, they've got recommendations for targeting, for trapping, and then if it's much more of a problem. So it's a continuum when you're dealing with pests. You won't be getting rid of it. It's just are you going to best manage it? And now I'd like to share a simple method for companion planting. And this is called square foot gardening. And it's a method developed by Mel Bartholomew. He was a civil engineer back in 1981 when he saw that the rows and rows of crops and monocropping maybe wasn't the best for the environment and for the plants. And so basically it incorporates companion planting, a way to intensely plant a lot of plants in a small amount of space. And it brings organic gardening to homes, to schools, communities, the world, and their foundation has a mission to end food insecurity 1 square foot at a time. So beds are divided into sections that are 1 square foot each. And on the square foot gardening site, and a lot of other people have charts, so this is one from Simply Smart Gardening. They make it really simple to get the spacing right so you don't have to memorize the spacing on each of your seed packets. So for example, if you're planting lettuce or garlic or parsley, you plant 4 seeds per square. If you're planting something like radishes or carrots, you can plant 16 per square. So you're saving seeds. Your plants are planted just right, so they're not overcrowded and stressed out. And it becomes quite easy. So this is wonderful for children. If you have kids, you want them to help you out. Here's what the students at Pioneer Elementary School learned. So they're learning about how many seeds get planted in each square. They can poke their holes or lay the seeds on the top. It's easy, it's fun. This is from my house on the square foot gardening site. It's easy to make your square foot gardening, and you can just lay this on top of your beds or your raised beds. And this was one that my husband helped me make, although he let me screw in the screws. And what's great is after a season, you can take this and store it in your garage, if you remember, and I'm not good at remembering. But at the school, we didn't have time to build out of lath, so we used twine and eye bolts, and we made our square foot beds. And then we labeled them 1 through 10, A through Z, so the kids could learn alphanumeric coordinates. And then the students were given little packets of seeds. So they were told, where do you put the seed in D2, X3? They found their coordinate. They also knew that your broccoli, 3 seeds, your radishes, 16, your sugar peas, 8. And then they were able to just start planting. So here's a class. They're independently planting. Your kids could do that also at home. So here's lettuce. Pretty successful. 4 seeds per square. Here's spinach, 9 seeds per square, and it was easy to see, one didn't germinate, let's put another seed in. And the cool season garden is now growing. We have trellises on the north side. So it's fun to play with your taller crops, shading other crops. You don't have to have trellises on your north side if you want some taller crops in the middle and to be able to shade what's underneath. But we tend to have the taller peas and then our other cool season crops that are growing. And then as the kids take out the arugula and the radish, they're able to then transplant their warm season crops, their beans, their tomatoes, their basil, and it makes it really, really easy. It makes it easy for succession planting. I took out all the lettuce in here, let me plant 4 more seeds of lettuce through the seasons. So it makes it really easy through the years. It makes it easy to border your gardens with the flowers that are going to be able to trap those pests, deter them from your other crops. And then in the fall, they've planted some of the cover crops to help with the nitrogen fixing. And the students, now that hopefully the snow will end, they're going to go out there this week. So you'll have an army of 400 kids with scissors, and they will be cutting down the cover crops. And that will be the green manure. And then after another week or 2, they'll be ready to start direct sowing their cool season crops. So most plants, many are going to get along. And so don't worry too much about memorizing all of the plant combinations, but there are a few to avoid. And the ones that you might want to avoid are the ones with differing water needs, ones that compete for water. If they're both heavy feeders, you don't want 2 heavy feeders right next to each other. If they're attracting the similar pests, you don't want them to be a beacon and calling the same pests, or if they're both attracting the same disease. And then we're going to talk about allelopathic type of plants. So some that you might want to avoid: beans and onions. Onions tend to kill the bacteria on beans, so it suppresses their growth. But then other research says, you know what? Even though the bean growth might be suppressed a little, the onions grew great. So do your research. Tomatoes and corn are a pair that you may want to avoid because they're both heavy feeders and they share the same pests. So it's like shining a beacon, come over here, pests. Asparagus or celery and carrots are the same way. They're attracting the same kind of diseases. Garlic can stunt the growth of asparagus. So plant it a little further away. Rosemary and cucumbers have different watering needs. So cucumbers need a lot of water. Rosemary is drought tolerant. So if you plant it by the cucumber and just water it like crazy, you're going to kill your rosemary. Potatoes and pumpkins, they compete for the root space and compete for nutrients. And that's why we keep those apart. The squash family has a whole nother problem with cross-pollination, and I'm not going to get into that today, but if you want to know about why you want only 1 plant of each variety, if you're saving seeds, talk to Amelia. She knows this so well. And then sunflowers have trouble as companions, which brings us to the topic of allelopathy. And this is nature's weed killer or growth suppressor. And it can be pronounced many, many different ways. So I tend to pronounce it allelopathy and allelopathic. Others you might hear allelopathy. So there are a lot of ways to pronounce it. But plants will compete for sunlight, for space, for water, nutrients, and some plants will outcompete other plants by releasing chemicals that will inhibit seeds from germinating or plants from fully developing. So rhododendrons are allelopathic. And now it makes sense because in my yard had beautiful rhododendron, and in the border I had all these non-invasive campanula that has beautiful purple flowers except where the rhododendron was. So I divided, planted by the rhododendron, nothing. I did this year after year, and now as I'm taking a look at companion planting, I'm realizing the rhododendron releases a chemical that suppresses some plant development. Now, some plants have allelopathic properties that affect many different kinds. Some might only affect one or two type of plants. And not only can that living plant release some of that allelopathic chemical into the soil, but also if it's decaying, that might also leach into the soil. But the good thing is, once that plant matter is fully decayed, the allelopathic tendencies tend to time out. Now, most of what we know about this is through trial and experience. There are studies with the big farm crops, your wheat, corn, etc. So it's new, so check the science, look it up. More and more is being learned all the time. And I'm relatively new to gardening. So in my home garden, the first year I planted Swiss chard in one bed. Beautiful Swiss chard. The next year I planted sunflowers. And the sunflowers grew right away. And I thought, I'm going to shade and plant some Swiss chard. Nothing. I thought, oh, those birds got the seeds. So I planted some more Swiss chard. Nothing. Oh, those birds. The sunflower eventually died. I pulled them up. And then I'm thinking towards the fall, I'm going to try one more time Swiss chard. So I planted Swiss chard. I've got Swiss chard growing like crazy. And so Amelia tells me I've got to stop blaming the birds and apologize to the birds. And it's probably the allelopathic residue of the sunflower. Swiss chard is not a good companion for sunflower, but lettuce tends to work. And because they can linger, we have to take care with our cover crops. And so with cover crops, with their allelopathic properties, for example, rye, we want to just make sure we cut it down, use it as green mulch, leave it for a couple of weeks so that residue will dissipate before you plant your seeds. So take care. Also use crop rotation because your broccoli might have some residue or attract diseases that build up, and you don't want to keep planting broccoli after broccoli after broccoli. So rotate the crops as well. So if you're in doubt whether something is allelopathic, then here's a suggestion. So if you're sowing seeds after broccoli, cabbages, sunflower, then take some of your compost in new garden soil and place it on top. And then when you put your seeds, you're putting it into the good soil. And then by the time they germinate and the roots start to grow down, if there's any allelopathic residue down there, the plant will be strong enough. So that's one way. Just put some new compost and some soil. So the garden is an ecosystem comprising many complex layers of plants, fungi, the goal is to create biodiversity on every layer. And so now that we kind of have a picture of the need for biodiversity, I want to take you back in time again. The Irish potato famine of 1845. How many of you learned about this in school? Yeah. And I learned that a quarter of the population died from the crop failure. 1 million people. 1 million people migrated to other lands. And what I didn't learn and what I didn't question until learning about companion planting was, why did the potato crop fail? And according to UC Berkeley, in order to feed that growing population, they decided they're going to plant one type of potato, the lumper potato, all genetically similar. But what happened was that they had this mold rot, and it quickly spread to all the potatoes, and it turned them into this inedible slime. And that's why they couldn't save them and eat them. Now, it might not have been as devastating if they had planted different types of potatoes. Maybe it would have only affected the lumper potato or different kind of crops. But they decided to put all their eggs into the lumper potato. They bet, they risked it all, and they lost. And now let's go back to the Great Dust Bowl in the US, the 1930s. So with the Western movement, and if you think about all this beautiful soil structure for thousands of years, the plains were being plowed and tilled. All of that was broken up and dying. Fields left uncovered until the crops start growing. Monocrops being sowed. Now along comes several years of drought, and the wheat dies, the corn dies. And when you have that soil exposed, you've got the dust, and that was the Great Dust Bowl. But I didn't ever question, going through school, what was there before this dust bowl? And what was there were hundreds and hundreds of grasses and herbs and plants, and for thousands of years. 13,000 years was one study. And you had some grasses growing 8 feet tall and roots down 6 feet. And they could be adaptable when there were droughts, when there was a lot of rain. And then you also had 30 to 50 million buffalo on the plains. Think of all that manure. So we put our efforts into single crops, plowing, and that's what we replaced these rich plains with, and we lost. And now let's revisit these cabbage rows from the start that were gobbled up by the moth caterpillars. And now imagine these cabbages are surrounded by companion plants. So you've got your garlic and other flowers to repel these moths. They're flying around and they're confused. They don't know where to land. You've got your oregano, your thyme, your lavender, your marigold that repels them. You've got your nasturtium that's saying, come over here, I'm going to trap you. You've got your other plants, your carrots and parsley that attract your parasitic wasps, and your ladybugs and your lacewing, and they'll feed on the pests. So it's the polyculture and companion planting. It doesn't make the pests go away, but it's more difficult for those pest infections to occur. So, how to begin? Now, it may seem like a lot, but for me, it's breathe and start small, one bed at a time. And for me, I just plant a few strong scented plants. and some flowers like cosmos, calendula, marigold, and flowers to attract the pollinators and to attract the beneficial bugs. That's the first thing. Second, I might learn 1 or 2 good pairings. Tomato and basil, great pair, great companions. Plant a lot of that together. Cucumber, sunflower. And I might learn 1 or 2 combinations to avoid. For example, put my broccoli away from the tomatoes. Brassicas and tomatoes don't really mix. So there's no recipe. That's the fun thing about gardening. There are no mistakes, only experiments. You're the conductor, you're the architect, the artist, and you're creating function and beauty in your own garden. You can play. So you're planting to attract the pollinators, create habitat for wildlife, create better soil structure in your little piece of the world. And as you use the ancient practices and combining it with the science, you're building not only better, more productive gardens, but you are making a positive difference in the health of the planet. And then hopefully at the same time, you're having fun and enjoying your garden. And I think you received some handouts on the internet. There are lots of companion planting charts and what to avoid. I didn't print these out for you because I have no idea if it's really based on the science or if it's based on folklore, but explore the internet. There are all sorts of free things to explore. I gave you something from the West Virginia Extension, a summary of companion planting, and they do have a chart of good companions and ones to avoid. So anything from an extension has more science behind it. And there are tons of books, some that have a little bit of science base behind it. Others, like Carrots Love Tomatoes, is fascinating to read, but it may not be backed by science. So there are a ton of resources to try out in your yard. So thank you so much.